Hi, guys. I'm here with my co host, Augie, and I'm Nori, the mother of three hybrid children from Pleiades. Did she say that?
Yes,
Augie,
she did.
we're gonna have to go into the annals of history, not annals, guys. Don't be thinking that way. The annals of history to prove that. And the other thing I was just kind of playing with here is how many of you miss the beginning because you're in the kitchen mixing your drink or getting your snack, and you know the beginning's always the same, right? But I have news for you guys. I'm so excited. We do have Captain Randy Cramer here with us, and we're going to talk about so many cool things. Augie, I know you want to say a few things about the mastermind before you introduce our beloved and favored guest.
Yeah, I'm gonna shorten that down to less than a minute because we want to hear from Captain Randy, and phenomenal guy, and you're gonna love this. And I wanted to say something about that mastermind that we have put together. We are doing incredible things, and it seems like we are creating out of seemingly nothing sometimes. We combined all our minds together, send it into the quantum existence, and it comes back. And there it is in the physical. So if you want to be part of something that is bigger than yourself, come and check it out. We did something with the hurricane too that in the last few days were hidden for Louisiana. There was a hurricane two going to a three out in the ocean. And we were visualizing that thing to fizzle out. And guess what? It did. By the time it hit shore, it went down to a tropical storm, which is not normal, but it did happen. And we have done this before. We created other things. So come and have a look. And I think that's my minute, and I'm done.
I want to say something about your minute. I want to say something about your minute because being me, a little skeptical at times, I'd go, "Oh, sure, they impacted this hurricane. Come on." But I have to tell you guys, we've been doing this, what, 3 years, Augie?
Yep.
And every single storm system that we worked on truly became, I mean, it didn't, turn around and disappear, but it came less intense and it became more into a non-event, and it's all on video. We can show you guys, but we do it for people's health. We do it for animals' health. We do it for people's family members who are not well, for people's abundance, and it works. We're putting our mind power together and manifesting.
Yeah, and we developed a new concept.
I
A
just
new
manifested.
Yeah, go ahead.
I just manifested Captain Randy Cramer. Hi,
Yes.
Randy.
How you doing?
So good to
Hey,
see you, kinda.
yeah. At least
Yeah,
his
I
hair
Zoom
his
updated
hair
my
spirit.
software and you can't see me
Yeah,
now, but I'm here.
it's good
Good to
to
see you.
see you. We haven't seen you in a while, and I know that you've done so many things, but I have one question because I'm starting a new show called Infinite Awakenings, and it's for the people who are just waking up, right? I mean, a lot of us are 10 years deep in this. And if they walked into one of your master classes, they wouldn't know what planet they're on. Even the language would sound strange to them. So how would you tell a beginner, Randy, how it is that you came about to do what you did, and how they could possibly wrap their brain around it?
Well, I actually think I do a pretty darn good job of simplifying the information that I present to people so that you don't have to have a lexicon of being in a community of awareness, that I keep it a physics-based conversation more than anything else. So just to answer that part of your question, but to then answer your question. So short version of the long story is Post-World War II, covert military space program activity went from a hobble to a gallop to a full sprint between the 1940s, 50s, and 60s. So that I would say by the mid 1960s, the most of the programs were really moving with rocket boots at that point. That there was the slow sort of processes in the 40s and the 50s was really because we were still wrapping our heads around some of the components and technologies, and our materials science was literally catching up during those decades to the materials that we needed to be able to use. So, but by the 60s, we were in, I'd say, full sprint mode for covert military space program activities. And that includes propulsion systems, power systems, weapon systems, as far as aircraft are concerned, and certainly weapon systems as far as human beings are concerned. It became abundantly clear that just giving the normal U.S. soldier, of the period, high-tech weaponry was not a solution, especially since all of the contact information that we were having showed that more often than not just military personnel, but non-military personnel and their first and initial encounters with exotic life forms, extraterrestrials, didn't often go for them well psychologically and emotionally. So more often than not, people were traumatized and shocked in ways in which even if their frontal lobe thought that they could handle it. As I explained this difference often, the amygdala is a much faster response system in your brain, and it will go into fight, flight, or freeze far quicker in nanoseconds before the several seconds it can take your frontal lobe to go, oh, I think I can process this experience. Well, before that happens, your amygdala can cause complete and utter panic. So
That's right.
it became a necessity to make soldiers from the ground up that could be trained from childhood to be prepared to deal with exotic environments, exotic opponents, and exotic tools and weapons. So that was really started the augmented soldier programs in the 60s. And by the time I came around and was born in 1970, early 1970s, the programs were making some adjustments, and but the goal and the purpose and the function for this entire organization was to prepare itself for what was believed and felt to be, and I think rightfully so, an imminent military event in which we would face as an entire planet and a species a confrontation with uh, the stellar world. And if we were not adequately prepared, we would have to rely on someone else to do it for us, which I don't think is ever the right response, especially when we're talking about as a global species, allowing some other species to perform our planetary and space security for us is a foolhardy thought. So it made sense that the only thing that we could do is develop our own covert programs, and that lots of safeguards had to be removed so that we could do that quickly and as efficiently as possible. And I mean, when I say safeguards removed, I mean to in some degrees the extent of which the list of crimes and human rights violations are long. That's absolutely true. But it is also true to say that not every program is a lawless, horrible entity unto itself. Special section was created by Dwight D. Eisenhower if in the late 1954 timeframe after dealing with having a couple of ambassadorial events where he met extraterrestrial ambassadors to discuss options, which essentially were what he felt were not good options. They were basically saying, "Look, surrender, give up your weapons and surrender, and we'll take care of you in one form or another." And we were hearing this from sort of two different directions, and
Mm.
one may have had better intentions than the other, but I don't think he was wrong to say, "Why in the world would we give up the only thing that they're afraid of?
Mm.
Why in the world would we
Yeah.
do that? The only safety we have is being able to say, oh yeah, if you try that, if you touch my stuff, I will put a nuclear bomb up your nose and we'll have a conflict about it. And while it is true that for some species under the
Opening
right
of
circumstance,
the
an atomic weapon may not be a threat, but that does not mean that an atomic weapon is not dangerous and not a threat to an extraterrestrial vehicle. They certainly can be, and some have been taken down and brought down using atomic weaponry. So it certainly can be an effective tool. So he decided, essentially, because the mess that Truman had handed him, which was to create the MJ-12 committee, the special study groups, and to essentially his plan, Truman's plan, was to spread it all out into all of these different agencies because he thought that that would be safer and more secure. Decades later, we can recognize that that was the dumbest decision that could have ever been made on the subject. And Harry Truman fucked America completely in the bunghole when he did that. And I hope I can use that coarse language because it's absolutely correct. He screwed us all for all of history by dividing the system up into a way that created a covert competitive system with no accountability. If he had bothered to create a single entity that answered to the president of the United States and was handed from to president to president to president as, the person who was read in and in charge of these things, then we would still be in decent shape. But because it was completely taken out of the normal path of governmental oversight and processes is what created the dangerous and horrible situation that we have today. But I
Right.
digress. Because Eisenhower had been handed this pile of lumpy steam of crap that he knew was a mess, he thought that the smartest thing that he could do was try to reel it back in by creating a completely read in military branch, which was the United States Marine Corps Special Section, fill them with military personnel who are sworn, who have to raise their right hand and say the old soldier's oath, the old soldier's oath, which is, I solemnly swear to protect the Constitution, the people and country of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic. That one. Whereas all of the personnel that Truman put in charge, a lot of them were contractors and were given this
Yeah,
job outside of their governmental tasks and duties. So they were not in any way obligated with the same oath. So Eisenhower felt that that was the right thing to do. And then eventually
I,
it became necessary that we were going to have to create our own augmented soldiers, of which I was made.
Okay.
Did a
And this is the
30-year
yeah,
part.
tour.
yeah.
This is the
I'm
part.
ending it right there. And then I did a 30-year tour
No,
for
no, no,
them, and
no,
then here I am.
Randy. If I were, sitting at the kitchen table, and this is the first time I'm hearing this, and my hands are sweating, how would you tell me that you went to Mars?
Well, I mean, because there's some data to support that we were there earlier. So there's a leaked video of the first drone that landed on Mars in the 1960s via a program that was shown once and then uh, essentially shelved in the UK called Alternative 3, which was done by what was it? It was Science Report was the name of the program. It was for BBC4, which is a completely reputable, like fact-driven program of the
Yeah.
time. And I realize I've heard some people talk crap about the program itself of whether or not it's legit. It's as far as I'm concerned, it has every earmark of a legitimate production by a legitimate production company who was doing their best to try and present the information that they had and certainly presented a plausible case to explain how right soon after World War II, that the United States and the Soviets at the time, now the Russians, entered into a secret space agreement to develop the first bases on the backside of the moon. And there's significant, and what they did was look at the launches that were made they could track post of the earliest launches in the late 1960s, all of these post launches in the early 70s, and they did a little map on the backside of the moon and showed this little circle where all these launches, both American and Soviet, were centered around. Well, that's indicative that they were not competitive, that they were not at risk of stepping on each other's toes, but that they were in fact cooperating on a dark side, backside of the moon base, which we all know if it's on the dark side, you can't see it. So any facilities that are back there, the civilian population, why would you know about it? Why would you see it? It's on the back side, you can't see it.
Yeah.
It's a duck blind, right?
Yeah.
So there's a ton of evidence. I would say for anyone who's nervous or shaking at this point, I would say, look, you got to like do some homework because it turns out that there is what we call the inconspicuous mountain. Sorry, conspicuous mountain of evidence, not the inconspicuous lack of evidence, but the conspicuous mountain of evidence that talks about these programs, these processes, when it started, what started when, who, where, and what happened next and next and next and next and over
That's
decades.
so
And because we're
helpful.
talking about
Yeah.
something that's older than most of us in the room now, we're talking about something that started back in the 1940s. Most of us were born after that. So a lot of this has been happening longer than most of us have been alive, which and is consumed an amount of resources that when we look at the people who've done the research on the missing money, which I'm talking about like missing governmental money, missing in the general accounting budget, black budget money.
Yeah.
We're talking about trillions and trillions of dollars, right?
Yeah. And Randy, uh, I'm just a little nervous too about the subject here because we're still on YouTube, but I wanted to maybe hear a little bit about what is on the moon. I know there are other people that have said there are probably a couple of million people living out there of
At
different
least, yeah.
species.
Yeah, at least for sure. So I would recommend to anyone who hasn't watched it, I'm pretty sure you can still find it on YouTube, but do a search and look up Alex Collier's Moon and Mars lecture, which he did back in the 80s. I want to say it might even be on like an old black and white, VHS video or something that someone did that was really a long time ago, but he actually had accumulated many of these really good photographs that were taken by the lunar orbiters before they were washed out and cleansed out in the 1973-1974 timeframe. So, fascinatingly enough, a lot of the early coffee table books, like these big Time Life books about the moon landing, if you could find one in a bookstore that happens to be pre 1973, 1974, you would actually be able to get your magnifying glass out and look at some of these pictures and see some of these things that he's talking about. And there are visible lit domes. There are visible crumbled domes that are ancient. There are visible architectural structures. There's visible land bridges. There's some, and he goes over these images in his lecture. If anyone who haven't seen those, watch it because he's literally taking that from the evidence that was taken from the lunar orbiter and from these books again that were produced in the late 1960s and very early 1970s. So as far as the trail of evidence is concerned, it's an incredibly good
Yeah.
place to start for anyone who might be skeptical of the subject. The trail of evidentiary factualness of these images and where they come from and his analysis of them is a really great start because after you watched, an hour and a half or 2 hours or whatever, of him doing this, you're going to just go, wow, there's a bunch of stuff on the backside of the moon. And once you see that there's a bunch of stuff on the backside of the moon, then you don't have to imagine whether or not that's true. Then the rest of it, sort of falls into place, which is,
Yeah.
well, why then wouldn't there have been other species that have been hanging out there for way longer since we've ever been up there? Like that makes complete sense. And some of the
That's a
structures that those ETs built are absolutely gigantic. And for anyone who, again, would want more factual reference, I'd reference the old Dr. Greer Stephen Disclosure Project videos, which the old ones I would say just because not that the new movies aren't fabulous that he's done, they're great production value, but some of the older Disclosure Project videos have some evidence of a couple of guys who talk about working in the photo labs and seeing the photographic evidence and
Yeah.
talking about structures that are miles long and miles high. They're literally just absolutely gigantic structures based on the scale of the photographs that they were looking at and so forth. So it's it's not a very secret
Mm.
anymore that,
Yeah.
there's stuff on the backside of the moon. If you want to look up, I think there's even an online photograph somewhere of the Mona Lisa, which was from one of was Apollo
Yeah.
18 or 19, which there were several covert Apollo launches, rocket launches also later. And I want to say the one in question, 18 or 19, they went to landed near a crashed vehicle that was very, very old that had been there a really, really long time, and they pulled out this frozen uh, female ET corpse that was, I want to say she's about 9 feet tall, 8 or 9 feet tall. So she's bigger than a person, but because frozen, perfected preservation, it's got little ice crystals you can see on the skin and so forth. But they got photographs of that.
Wow.
So there's
Mm.
there if you if someone literally has never heard this before, it's like it's because you haven't looked. Every time I hear someone say, "Well, they say there's no evidence," and I just have to like roll my eyes and go, "Only if you've never looked."
Well,
Um,
and you're teaching
Only if you've
it. I
never
mean,
looked,
that
because
was a
the
great
information
rollout.
that's available is absolutely extensive
Hmm.
Yeah.
that exists. The
That,
information that exists, and I mean like good evidence. People that have done their homework and have done the FOIA work and have the documentation and have paperwork and have good photograph and have good reliable sources. And I mean, there's people who have done their homework and they've been doing it for decades. And
but it's work.
I,
It is work.
and I would just help anyone who's, if this is your first time, it's like, oh, you got some homework to do, and
Yeah.
do your homework, and there is some incredible data that has already been presented and done on the subject by
Yeah. And if
fabulous
nothing,
researchers who've done the work way before I ever came along. And
yeah. And
and
if,
what my experience is so classified, I can't show you pictures. I can tell you stuff. I can talk about things, but there's a lot of evidence that I am not able to present. I did one time present a lecture in which I had some photographs that were given to me by someone who used to work for NASA, and I got satellite pictures in there, Mars satellite pictures from the Mars orbiter showing forests on Mars that even identify on the picture, on the photograph, on like the outside. There's all the time index stuff, the official markings are on it and everything. I've got a couple of those. They even identify that it's forest in the southern region, near the southern polar region.
mhm.
Um, so there's just a ton of information that's out there that is available if someone wants to like do their homework, and then it's a morass of and then it's a morass after that. Like what has come on top of all of the credible information is some less credible information, which not all
Mm.
of it is wrong and not all of it is correct, and that just makes it more of a morassy kind of thing for
Mm.
people to have to
Yeah.
deal with. But Bob Lazar took a bunch of polygraphs. He worked on, the reverse engineer, one of the first reverse engineering projects down at S4. He's talked openly about that. He's passed polygraphs. He's now, last time I heard, he's got his own little company. They do tech development stuff, and someone actually came and bothered him because they were thinking about doing this. And I think there's going to be a new movie or documentary or something, or a mini series that someone's going to do about his whole story. And he was actually like, I don't want to talk about it. I'm glad people don't bother me about it anymore. It brought me nothing but headache. Yeah, it was true, and I paid for it, and I many ways regret having been the person to come out and say it and try to convince people of something that they didn't want to believe was true, and nearly ruin my life and ruin my family's lives. But I'm fine now. I got a business. We're doing great. But whatever. Thanks for asking me, but I don't care. I don't want to talk about it. Have a nice day. So it's messed up his life bad enough that he didn't want to talk about it anymore. But still on record, the book that he wrote is still on record, and this document
Yeah.
statements are still on record. And he passed several polygraph exams. Um, I've met. What's his? All of a sudden, I'm having a brain fart on his name.
Look on the mind.
Yeah.
Um,
You're too
Well,
young for that.
when it comes
No,
to those
the
pictures.
abductee. What was it'll come to me in a second, or we'll remember it. The abductee who was him and his logging work buddies were out, and he got zapped by the beam and taken
Yeah.
up in the ship for 5 days. They did a movie. They did Fire in the Sky, which is totally not the true story. And I listened to him
Yeah.
explain the true story. It'll come to me in a
All
second. I'll
right,
remember it.
chat room. Who knows? If somebody in the chat room knows the answer
Someone
to
will
this.
know. And I've met him. We've hung out. We've drank beers together. And I'm all of a sudden I'm completely drawing a blank. I can picture his head, his red hair, and his big mustache. Um,
I know who you're talking about. I can't think of it
I
either,
know it'll
but
come to me.
When
Anyway,
it
but that actually event has some of the most credible evidence that it actually happened, which includes all of his work buddies who were with him and saw it happen and saw him run out of the truck and touch the light and then get thrown across the clearing and then get picked up and disappeared. And then what they show in the movie is not what happened at all. He tells this much more interesting story of what coming conscious in this low ceilinged, very warm, very humid room, and with in his leg feeling injured, and he was on an exam table, and he kind of fell off the table. And these two ETs came in. They had a little bit of a confrontation, but they convinced him to lie back down, and then he passed out, and they fixed his leg and then returned him about 5 days later um, across the highway from a phone booth, because this happened decades ago enough that phone booths were still a thing. And he got on the phone, and this story at the time had gone huge crazy. Like everyone was talking about it. It was in the news. He was a missing person. Everyone was looking for him and wanted to know what happened. It was all crazy. The FBI got called in and was interviewing his friends, and it all got nuts in the town that it happened in. And then they dropped him off. He goes across the street, picks up the payphone with 5 days of beard growth on his face from the day that from when he left. So he knew that some time had passed, but he wasn't exactly sure at that point. Picks up the phone, and there's a recording of him making this phone call because the operator, because of this case being so like in the public eye, broke protocol and didn't hang up, and she kept recording the phone conversation. So the phone conversation, the operator recorded it of him going, yeah, I'm still blowing my brain on his name. Yeah, I'm so and so, and I got abducted by aliens, and they just dropped me off, and I need a ride to go see my family. I'm not sure where I am. And the operator was like, "No, we'll send someone to get you." And he got checked out and everything. And I mean, but there's a ton of like evidence that that occurred. You know what I'm saying? It's like it's it's not
Yeah,
just somebody's story with no documented evidence and no eyewitnesses. It's like a story that's got five eyewitnesses and like tons of polygraphs and investigators, and the FBI showed up, and then the recording of him reappearing 5 days later out of nowhere with no money in his pocket. And
yeah,
and
that
anyway,
was that was Travis.
Travis
Travis
Walton.
Walton. Thank you. That's all I needed to
Con-
hear. Yes, Travis
Con-
Walton. Really nice guy.
Yeah.
Constance Victoria Briggs wins the prize. Thank you, Connie.
Yes, thank you, Constance. High
Yeah.
five. Yes, Travis Walton was a
Now,
really
when we
wonderful guy.
talk, when you're talking about the pictures up there, um, Nori and I did a, video documentary on the moon pictures and the Mars pictures, and they are on our site on YouTube and on our website. We
Oh,
have
good.
a lot of the pictures that you actually talk about, including a large building that is formed as a swastika. It's in the Schrodinger crater up
Yep.
towards the edge. And I know you've seen that one.
Yep. I've seen that one. Yep, I've seen it. Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean the New Schwabenlanders are still a problem, and they still exist, and they're still a thing, and that's just going to be a problem until they're not. But again, there's a ton of evidence if someone wants to look into that and check that out. So there's actually a really well done documentary on the subject done by a couple of independent Russian documentary filmmaker kids that managed to. It was made in this really weird time when all of these former Soviet intelligence officers, army officers, were not forbidden from the old Soviet system and had not yet been forbidden by any of the new Russian system to talk about it. And so they were actually able to like go, oh yeah, we got tons of documents about this from spying, the Cold War spying documents that we got from the United States over the decades. Yeah, we got manifests showing, how much material they were taking there, with the shipments from Russia, how they built these underwater quays via submarine and steam generators. They had this whole freaking thing to it. And then when you
Yeah.
mesh that with what we know about Admiral Byrd's recollection of the events of the mission to, which was a high jump, the mission to go down
Yeah.
to Antarctica and sort out what was left of the Nazis, which there's not only the quotation from Byrd himself saying that the next global conflict will be fought by vehicles that can go to pole in a matter of minutes, but there is actually a series of newsreels that were done at the time because we didn't have TV news. It goes back far enough that we had newsreels, and there's newsreels of Admiral Byrd and the other fleet admiral who was in charge of the operation talking quite candidly about the mission and what they were doing and how it was specifically going down to investigate and sort out this remnant of what was left of the Nazis from the Third Reich. They were very, very blunt, in fact, in a couple of these newsreels that are only a minute or so long about what their mission was, what their plan was, and what they intended to do, and that it was supposed to last for 3 months, and they came back after 3 weeks from heavy casualties
Yeah.
because they got
And those.
outmaneuvered by a couple of aircraft that could do well. The Habano, the first Nazi-built, alien reproduction vehicle, is well documented. Um, there's a solid documentation about the projects that the Nazis were working on, and I mean, you could go. What was the guy's name?
Yeah. And hey, Randy,
Yeah.
uh, we're just past the bottom of the hour here, so I want to say something to the people that joined us late. We are talking with Randy Cramer. We're talking about the moon, what's there, and the secret space program, and it's getting deeper and deeper as we go into this. So, gosh, don't go anywhere. Like we used to say in the old days, don't touch the dial. So stay right with us because there is so much evidence, and he is bringing out a lot of it.
But
Tons.
Augie,
Yeah. There's just a
Augie, what about the joke you were gonna tell?
Oh no, that
No,
one
you're
is
not gonna. When we
uh,
set up the show, we decided we were going to be a little goofy tonight. Come on, Augie, tell the joke. Come on.
well. I've been kind of quiet here because my mind works like my browser on the computer. You know, I got 72 windows open and 16 of them are frozen, and I have no clue where the music is coming on. So here we go.
Actually, that's so true. It's funny. I'm sorry. I love it. I love it. So, Randy, what's happening now amid all of the distractions that we should be, beginning to maybe hone our focus into? Because let's face it, we're really distracted, right?
Oh, there's a lot going on. Yeah, that's for sure. So, in December of 2019, which would have been in the very, very, very earliest days of when we just were starting to hear that COVID cases were happening and people were discussing whether it was going to be a thing or not. And
Yeah,
then we found out.
let's be a little careful with that one because we're still on YouTube.
Well, all I want to say is to bring up the time period of when this happened. I wish to make no further specific comments about the pandemic, other than to
Yeah.
say that at that time, someone asked me, "Is this going to go away quickly?" And I was able to report what I had been given information from special section intelligence officers very concurrently to that period of time, which was we had just begun a 5 stage process at that point, and we were just entering into stage 1, which was the pandemic phase. And then stage 2, which would follow soon after, which certainly did, which would be the civil disruption phase. And then for those who don't remember, we had a year of worth of protests and riots and people being very angry. And that after the civil disruption phase would come the World War III phase, which Vladimir Putin, by invading the sovereign nation of Ukraine, began the World War III phase. China has been threatening to invade Taiwan, which would further involve them in that. We knew that the wild card factors that would come into play later would be Israel and North Korea. Israel, indeed, has already come into play again. Iran would come into play. Uh, China is really the last one to hesitate on their invasion of Taiwan, and that's because they have some internal issues there, but that's beside the point. So phase 1, pandemic phase, stage 2 phase, civil disruption phase, stage 3, World War III phase, which we're still moving through. And then stage 4 is the alien invasion phase. Now, and then stage 5 is reconstruction. So I will just say that of all of the things that the special section personnel have predicted and sent my way, which when I say predicted, I know that makes a lot of people think that this has all been sort of planned. And I'm going to say that's not true. What it is a series of events and incidents which are all like these lines approaching a central point, of which when they all kind of get to that central point become this massive thing that's happening all at once. And so what we're seeing is actually certain inevitabilities that we could trace back years, decades in some cases, where these things were coming from and why they were heading the direction they were headed and why they are where they are now. So that it's not like these things all of a sudden came to be, or someone said magically a few years ago they were going to throw this thing together. What we have are decades worth of trains on a course in which it was easy to predict eventually where that would end up. And now we're all getting where all the trains are coming together and colliding at the same station. So that's
Yeah.
what we're looking at. And I would say that everything that they have predicted, everything that they have said was going to occur, everything that they have said has come to pass, with the exception of an actual disclosure event that involves a lot of ships. Now, I will also digress there a little bit because I've had some issues. The command staff and I have gotten into a bit of an argument about this, and they have very much wished me to present this as an evasion event. And I get why, for psychological and emotional reasons, why they would want to do that, and I'm not faulting them for wanting to do that. I'm not faulting or saying that their intentions are nefarious by doing that. I don't think that's true at all. I think that the goal of projecting that idea to people is a a seriousness that then people are not surprised by when it occurs. So I get that. I value that. I respect that. However, because I do not think that that is actually 100% factually correct, I have a disagreement in presenting it as an invasion scenario.
Okay.
We have intelligence that would support the possibility that we're looking at an intervention scenario. But it really, whether it's an invasion or an intervention, might depend on who you work for.
Yeah.
Might depend on what, program you're involved in. And obviously, I'm not talking to either one of you, but who could be negatively affected by that could
Yeah.
vary depending on a variety of intelligence information that has come my way. Now, I cannot confirm that every piece of intelligence that has come my way is for certain. What I think is an aggregate of information that indicates that we're not just looking at an invasion scenario because we're already at civil war, and I don't mean here in the United States when as we do not programs, we are in a civil war. Why? Well, New Schwabenlanders equal Nazis. Well, and Nazis don't want to do anything except take over the world. So you can only negotiate or cooperate with them for so long, which was what happened in the 1950s, is they were able to negotiate a surrender to World War II, which didn't happen when people think that it did with the armistice, because no Nazis signed the armistice, either one of the armistices. It went on until 1953, and then they were given a covert seat on the United Nations as New Schwabenland. They were entered into a more of a cooperative agreement, and it was seen as a victory to end that war. And so the New Schwabenlanders engaged in the global covert military space program with everyone else, just biding their time like Nazis do, until that they would want to stick the knife in the back, which they have done. And so now that we are officially at the point where they have stuck the knife in and we are in an open, hot civil war among covert military space programs, I would say that this invasion scenario, I'm making a little air quotes that you can't see, really depends on whose side you're on and whose side that the forces that are approaching are on. And so people right there, I'm just going to say people can choose to believe whatever they want to believe at that point, because it's not going to matter. It's just going to be what it's going to be, and it's going to happen. And it's not going to be up to me to try and nitpick for anybody who's on what side, because I'm not going to get into that debate. And people can believe whatever they want to believe about who's good or who's bad in the world and who's going to get taken out and who's not. I don't care. But the truth just might be that we might actually get a factual version of intergalactic treaty bound correction, because we have
Wow.
signed treaties that engage us to be obligated to make certain agreements, and includes the New Schwabenländer. So this civil war arrangement has to be sorted out based on intergalactic law. It's not as chaotic as you might think, nor is it as divinely in the hands of the forces of light as you might think. It is really in the hands of the intergalactic legal system, and whether that system plays out properly enough, we're about to find out. And if it does play out properly, then everything will just work out fine. And if for some reason it doesn't play out properly, then it won't. And since we're new to this engagement and this environment, we're about to find out whether the intergalactic legal system works in favor of aspiring worlds, or whether it doesn't. We're about to find out for real. I think, based on my contacts within the Intergalactic Senate, I think we have more reason to be hopeful than scared. But that doesn't mean it's not going to be ugly or weird or terrifying momentarily, because all weird conflicts can be like that, and a global accept a new reality, and some people are forced to concede their reality. It's going to be shocking and uncomfortable, and there will be loss of life. Let's just hope it's not too bad.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
in the meantime, we should eat dessert first, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I
And
mean,
I, I
we should
think an awful
definitely
lot of
be
it.
living our lives like, every moment is precious. Yes,
Every
absolutely.
moment is
Yeah.
precious. And Margaret, thank you, Margaret, for the super chat. She asks you, Randy, are the white hats real?
So it's a binary argument to put it in terms of white hats and black hats. It's a very binary argument. And by binary argument or discussion, I mean that when you're an infant, you barely begin to understand at some point that there's something called night and day. And that's your binary understanding of your existence at that point. There's night, there's day, and you're either at the daytime part or you're at the nighttime part, and that's it. And but the truth is, as you get older, you realize there's mid morning, late morning, mid afternoon, middle of the night. There are all these
Yeah,
other identified zones of time that our right brain can still understand that are outside of a binary expression. And then our left brain eventually learns to tell time and realizes that there's 12:35 and 2:44 and AM PM, so that there's all these time is broken down into this structure of minutes and seconds as well, hours, minutes, and seconds. So our binary thinking is the most basic primitive thinking that we can have about something. And when we expand our understanding of something, we begin to understand that some things aren't often just not binary. And so the truth is, more often than not, there are no white or black hats. There are gray hats. And I say that meaning that the men and women who work within the government, who work within the intelligence agencies, who work within the military, who work within these programs, are more often than not in and of themselves either saints or sinners. They're neither the most saintly or the most evil people. They're people doing a job. And so their job is to get the job done. And that may have a really positive result, or that may have a slightly negative result, or it may have a very negative result. But the people doing the job are not really the ones responsible for that. They're the ones doing the job. The people up the chain of command bear a far greater responsibility in the movement of how things can either be seen as good or bad, light or dark. But most of the people who are doing their job are neither white nor black, they're gray. They do
yeah,
their job. And that may be a good thing or that may be a bad thing, depending on how the chain of command is doing its job. So
yeah. And what? Yeah,
the answer
yes,
is much more complicated than that. What there are definitely sides, there are definitely factions, there are definitely people cooperating, people at odds with each other, people trying to figure out how to come out of this and still be in one piece and have their organizations in one piece and their projects in peace
yeah,
and not be completely upended and devastated by it because newsflash, if the new Schwabenloungers were to win the global civil war, by everybody, most decent human beings can just kiss the world goodbye because a world run by Nazis is not going to be okay. And what are they going to do? Like day one, begin the cleansing, right? I mean, they're a bunch of murderous cleansers. So if
Yeah.
the New Schwabenloungers win this, they begin the cleansing. So let's hope and pray by all that is sacred and holy that we believe in that they don't. And if the intergalactic legal apparatus functions as it should, I do not believe that they will. But let's just make no mistake that what the stakes are
yeah.
when you're talking about one, do not think that it's in any way, shape, or form hopeless. I think by
No,
far that the indication is we're more than likely going to end up on the positive side of this, but from here to there,
Hang
no
on.
one, no one can predict exactly what's going to happen between here and there. So there is a huge amount of uncertainty. There will be death and loss of life. I just hope it's not that huge, but it could be a lot. But again, because so much of this is outside of the hands of anybody who's listening to this, my best, I mean, this is why I have students that I teach psionic skills to, because it's like, look,
Yeah,
what can you do? Nothing
exactly.
to
yeah.
affect any
That
of this other than what you can do to master yourself in your own mind and then what that can do to contribute to the whole. But sitting around and panicking does no good. But what's
yeah,
the best thing you can do? You sit down and meditate 3 times a day, focus your mind, like get your be a part of the solution of, conscious evolution instead of being the problem. That's why I teach my students and why I have students and why I put so much time and energy into that, because of all the things that one
Yeah.
could or could not
Yeah,
do. I mean, that's really about it. What we have is what we can develop in ourselves and how the aggregate of that can work together for a better future. But individually, there's nothing, that's going to determine, that most people can think or say or do, that's going to determine any of this going down. And we all just get to watch it and
yeah.
cross our
Randy,
fingers and hope that we're not in the splash zone.
Randy, you mentioned psionics and mentioned what you do. We want to hear. We have heard about the problems and the issues going on out there. We want to hear about the solutions. Talk to us about what you do in the
Good. That's always
classes.
my favorite part, actually. I don't like being
Yeah,
a negative Nelly, So, yeah, thank you for asking me that question. So, the truth is that we are a combination of things. It is a true thing to say that we're quantum creatures. It's also true to say that we're physical creatures. So, Newtonian mechanics exist, quantum mechanics exist. They both exist at the same time. They're both true at the same time, even though they also disagree with each other sometimes, but they still exist. So there is a truth that if you don't eat enough food, you'll starve to death and die. If you don't have adequate shelter or health care, you're probably going to die sooner than later. Those are real Newtonian realities that are not real. But it is also true that we can impact the reality that we are in and the place in it that we were in with quantum movement. So, where if we look at, because Heisenberg, the uncertainty principle, which is basically, is light a wave or a particle, and it really depends on, well, which way are you looking at it? And if you look at it like it's a particle, it's a particle. If you look at it like it's a wave, it's a wave. So here we have the same thing. If you look at the world through the Newtonian lens all the time, which I'm not saying that you should ignore the Newtonian lens. I'm just saying that if you look through the Newtonian lens all the time, then every problem is a Newtonian problem to overcome with Newtonian mechanics. So if you're looking at your life as, I need more money, well, then the Newtonian mechanic way of that is, what job can I get that makes more money, or what business, can I operate that makes me more money? What can I do in a Newtonian mechanical sense that generates more income and more dollars, that may or may not be more conducive than other. It's entirely if you're the type of person and you have found that your entire life you just keep moving from haunted house to haunted house, you might be attracting that through quantum entanglement, right? It might not be a random thing that you keep ending up in haunted houses. There might be a part of something in your reality, in your conscious or your subconscious, in which you're attracting. Now that's where it gets very complicated, because we can sit here and think and go, I'm visualizing this, I'm thinking about this, I'm doing this, I'm focusing on this. I can meditate and use my conscious brain and focus and focus and focus. But my subconscious mind is bigger than my conscious mind. And my subconscious mind might actually have other stuff in it. It might have other stuff uh, about personal value or worthiness or lack or wealth. I mean, these are all things that can get trapped in the subconscious. So one aspect of how we solve this problem is, I'm going to be a quantum focuser thinker instead of just a Newtonian thinker. Again, do not abandon Newtonian mechanics to do this. I do not recommend that. Um, I say that because I have a student who has had to be hospitalized several times by his father because he has refused to eat and thinks that he can be completely in his spiritual psionic self, and that he doesn't have to think about Newtonian mechanics. And he's in very ill health because of this. So I want to emphasize that, do not abandon the notion of Newtonian mechanics,
yeah,
but understand that quantum mechanics also work and you can also use them at the same time. And so, but the conscious act of using quantum mechanics is one aspect, but then we run into how do I keep myself from sabotaging myself because of what's in my subconscious? Ah, that's why meditation as a practice isn't just about sitting down, breathing, and focusing. It's about getting into your subconscious and going, what I tell, look, I tell my students, look, the truth is, as a meditator, if you want to get past the obstacles of your subconscious, you have to meditate with the intention of, I'm going to sit here quietly, drop down into the deeper part of my subconscious mind with a shovel, and I'm just going to start shoveling the shit. And when I've shoveled enough shit, it will be clear and I can actually see what's in here and I can actually understand what's going on in here and I can actually use the subconscious space of my mind for something far more productive than the Jungian refuse that most of our subconscious mind is. Because the
Mhm.
only solution to that is, as a meditator, to get out your shovel and start digging and
Yeah.
go through your childhood experiences and do a little bit of your own Freudian psychoanalysis and go through your own experiences, go through your own relationships with your siblings and your family members and your mother and your father and your grandparents and all the people in your life that formulated those subconscious patterns so that you can unravel them, unravel the Cordian knot of it. And this is, I can tell you this for so true. Once you unravel that knot and you start to get out of your own way, you don't have to put nearly as much conscious focus in the creative part, the part you're trying to manifest. You don't have to like you're blowing a blood vessel, like focus your mind because you've discarded and cleared out so much of that subconscious crap. All of a sudden, you will just start to pull everything to you that is in your vortex of manifestation that you're putting that. And the a species known as the Velodians have been giving us access to some pretty cool healing tech. So anyone who's interested in wanting to see what I'm doing and connect with what I'm doing, go there and click some buttons. I try to make
Oh,
it super easy. So
okay, so
Thank
that
you,
is
Ren.
CaptainRandyCramer.com for all the programs that you have and the publications and the classes. Just go have a look at it because there's stuff in there that can help us reprogram the subconscious mind, and that is important.
It is important. I
yeah,
just want to
I
say,
would say, I mean, there's dozens and dozens of hours of lecture of me talking about psionics. It's a subject of which I can and have and do go on and on and on and on and on and on without repeating myself for hours and hours. So anyone who's really interested in the subject, you will not find a greater library of accurate, factual, straightforward information on the subject in the world. And I know because I've looked.
Yep,
mhm.
sounds
And
good.
that's what I was going to what I was trying to say is if if you begin to look around, if you're awakening, and many of us are awakening by finding out that we have these traumatic wounds from our childhood. If you look around the internet right now, there's all kinds of people helping you to heal attachment trauma, helping you to heal the somatic trauma, helping you to heal all of the words that Randy used tonight to help it make sense to you to go, oh, that is me. I'm not that one person who had the most perfect people on the planet. And for all of the people I know, I feel like Randy has the best buffet of information for you to choose from to pick exactly what's right for you. So thank you,
Thank you. I
Randy,
appreciate
so
that.
much.
I appreciate that, and I've really worked hard to make a curriculum that is physics based and science based. So it doesn't matter what spiritual belief or system you may personally have, whatever your operating system is. I make it very simple to understand that you can expand your operating system to include a whole bunch of other very practical, functional
Yeah,
things that can make your brain super powered. And why wouldn't you want to do that? Why wouldn't you want to do that?
Absolutely. And we gotta go. So thank you very
Thank
much,
you,
Randy, for being
Randy.
with